Following the Dark Phoenix saga, there was much less of an overarching story in X-Men for a while. Although there would be brief plots like Cyclops' solo adventures or the battle with the Brood, the stories were instead connected much more thematically, as the stories of this era were somewhat darker and more mystical than before, with the X-Men battling 3 different species of demons, meeting Dracula, and almost turning into alien space bugs. As per usual, I'll be using Uncanny X-Men to refer to both the main book and its corresponding annual. This thematic trend is started right off the bat with Uncanny X-Men Annual number 4, where Nightcrawler gets a present for his birthday that emits a weird gas that seemingly kills him. To try and correct this, Professor Xavier enlists the help of Doctor Strange. Although it seems like Strange can do nothing, a weird portal appears and tentacles drag Strange, Storm, Colossus, and Wolverine through, plopping them right next to Nightcrawler outside of the gates of Hell. Now, this is no ordinary hell, as it is a perfect recreation of Hell from Dante's Inferno, the literary classic. As the X-Men progress through Hell, Storm ends up getting sent into the Circle for Thieves, but gets saved by Wolverine, and Nightcrawler nearly freezes to death, but gets saved by Colossus. The X-Men and Strange are then approached by the Master of the Inferno, Margali, who claims that Nightcrawler murdered her son. After using Doctor Strange's Eye of Agamotto to uncover the truth, it is revealed that Nightcrawler is Margali's adopted child and was under oath by her other son to murder him if he ever turned into a villain, which he did. Margali forgives Nightcrawler and vanishes, and then we learn that Nightcrawler's girlfriend, Amanda Septon, is actually Margali's daughter, Jemaine, and convinced Margali to give Nightcrawler a chance. And don't think too hard about the fact that Nightcrawler is in love with his adopted sister, and vice versa, because Claremont clearly does not care. Back in the main book, in issue 139, Storm uses her new position as leader of the X-Men to run a training session in the Danger Room with Angel, who is a little rusty since he's been out of the superhero business for some time. The X-Men gather afterwards for a cordial chat, and we learn that the X-Men's newest member, Kitty Pryde, is scared of Nightcrawler because of his appearance, although he feels bad about it. Kitty then gets her codename Sprite, which I dislike immensely and will not be using, before heading out with Storm to meet her new dance teacher, Stevie Hunter. Wolverine, meanwhile, takes Nightcrawler to Canada to try and reconcile with Alpha Flight and meet up with Guardian's wife, Heather, who's known Wolverine since before the X-Men. She also calls Wolverine by his real name, Logan, meaning that one of the X-Men finally learns Wolverine's real name. Wolverine and Nightcrawler then go out into earnest to meet up with Guardian, Shaman, and Snowbird, and agree to help them take down Wolverine's old foe, Wendigo, who has been causing trouble nearby. Wolverine, Nightcrawler, and Alpha Flight have some difficulties with Wendigo, but manage to take him out, when Snowbird shapeshifts into an angry Wolverine. The animal, not the man. However, this leaves her in a feral state, but once Wolverine, the man, not the animal, is able to talk her out of it, Shaman is able to cure the Wendigo of its curse. Unfortunately for Alpha Flight, the reward is disbandment, as the government has simply run out of funds. Back in the US, the X-Men's old foe Blah breaks out of prison, declaring that a new Brotherhood of Evil Mutants is forming. For reference, the Brotherhood was Magneto's old team in the original X-Men run. And in issue 141, the acclaimed two-parter Days of Future Past starts off with an old Kitty Pryde going by Kate, traipsing through the streets of a ruined New York City in the far future 2013. Oops. Future time travel will catch up to your dates like that. Anyway, she gets saved by Wolverine and delivers a piece to the mutant resistance inside one of the mutant detention camps. The resistance is comprised of Kate, Storm, Colossus, now Kate's husband, and a wheelchair Magneto, along with the Fantastic Four's Franklin Richards and a telepathic redhead named Rachel. Their plans to send Kate back in time to prevent their future from happening. In the present, Kitty easily completes her first Danger Room session by just phasing through everything, before her mind is suddenly replaced with the future Kate. Kate explains to the X-Men that the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants is going to murder presidential candidate Robert Kelly, Xavier, and Moira McTaggart, which will trigger a wave of anti-mutant hatred, culminating in the Sentinels eliminating all superhumans and taking over North America. Back in the future, the Resistance and Wolverine move towards the Sentinel Nerve Center, but Franklin is killed astonishingly easily. Back in the present, the X-Men arrive at the convention just as the Brotherhood, led by the shape-changing Mystique, attacks. Along with Mystique are the immovable Blob, the fire-manipulating Pyro, the earthquake-creating Avalanche, and the precog Destiny, who can see the future. The X-Men are able to deal with most of the Brotherhood, although the military is intent on capturing all the mutants. Pyro, Avalanche, and Blob are arrested, with Mystique reverting back to her guise as government operative Raven Darkholm. In the future, the Resistance succeeds in their goal, but Wolverine, Storm, Colossus, and Magneto are all killed. In the present, Kate saves Senator Kelly from being shot by Destiny, who uses a freaking crossbow, by the way, and her mind reverts back to normal, implying that the future is saved. The X-Men return home, but Kelly enlists the help of Sebastian Shaw and notorious stick-in-the-butt Henry Peter Gyrick to enact more mutant control called Project Wide Awake. I don't really think Days of Future Past is that great, but I can't deny how much influence it's had, adding time travel to the X-Men mythos and making the Sentinels and the government such major players in the X-Men's world. On the other end of the spectrum, the next issue gives a riff on the hit movie Alien, as one of the Nagari demons from issue 96 attacks Kitty while she's alone in the mansion. The other X-Men are out doing Christmassy things, like Wolverine hanging out with his love interest Mariko, but Kitty's just stuck by herself for some reason. Even Cyclops gets to show up for the first time since he left the team, joining a boat crew led by Lee Forrester. Kitty decides to vent her lonely frustrations in the Danger Room when the demon shows up and chases her through the mansion. Kitty only managing to narrowly escape time and again with her quick thinking and her phasing powers. She even tries to kill the demon in the Danger Room, but to no avail. She then heads to the X-Men's jet and burns out the demons with the engines. Although it looks like she's won, when Kitty goes out to check, the demon's hand reaches out of the flames towards her, the Cyclops claiming that she is time to scream, before cutting to the X-Men returning to the mansion. Kitty is fine, obviously. The demon burned itself out, but when people talk about how good this story is, I think they really undersell the execution of the ending, which I wanted to highlight. It's also John Byrne's last issue as artist, and what a last issue it is. Issue 144 is pretty much a Cyclops solo issue where he and Lee go see Lee's dad, who has been murdered and replaced with the demon Despair, who feeds on fear. He makes Cyclops relive the plane crash where he lost his parents and then fight Sentinel versions of the X-Men and Dark Phoenix, although Cyclops is able to overcome his fear and defeat Despair with the help of this issue's guest star, Man-Thing. Other than that, Wolverine and Nightcrawler make Kitty upset by poking fun at her description of the mansion, although they do apologize. Starting in issue 145, we have what I guess you could call the Dark Storm Saga, which starts when Storm and Stevie get attacked at a ballerina show by Miss Locke, the assistant of the Rollfo Arcade. Locke asks for the X-Men's help in rescuing Arcade from Dr. Doom, and to ensure that the X-Men assist, she kidnaps Moira, Amanda, Angel's girlfriend Candy, Jean's parents, and Colossus' younger sister Ileana, and proceeds to kidnap Stevie. Storm comes up with a plan to split the team, having half of them do what Locke asks and the other half go to Arcade's desert amusement park Murder World to rescue their allies. However, they'll need more help, especially as Kitty is sick, so they recruit Havoc, Polaris, Banshee, still injured from the battle with Moses Magnum a while back, and Iceman, who has done nothing on Claremont's run thus far. Storm takes the main team to Doom's castle in America, where she has dinner with Doom. As it turns out, Arcade is working with Doom to kidnap the X-Men, and they manage to do that just when Doom turns Storm into Chrome, putting her in a catatonic state. Then Wolverine, Nightcrawler, Colossus, and Angel try to free Storm, but are easily captured as well. The next issue opens with Doom and Arcade chatting about their philosophies, essentially boiling down to Doom being methodical and Arcade being sadistic. In order to study the X-Men, Doom put them in Moral World-style traps to design and test their capabilities, while he's made a robot servant that looks like Storm. The storm is meanwhile brewing overhead, which Doom guesses is caused by Storm, although she's effectively catatonic. The bulk of the issue, though, focuses on Havoc's, Banshee's, Polaris' and Iceman's attempts to break the captives out of Murder World. They succeed without much fanfare and decide to head home, leaving the X-Men to fend for themselves against Doom. Bad move. The final issue of the arc opens with Nightcrawler 2 miles in the air and him skydiving into the waters below, barely surviving his escape from Doom's castle. Wolverine, Colossus, and Angel make their escapes as well, and Wolverine and Nightcrawler meet up to fight Doom. The battle goes well enough, and Doom gives him the device to free Storm. It works, although Storm's claustrophobia made her go mildly insane while inside the Chrome, and she has created the massive primordial storm outside the castle. She then literally pushes everyone away, not wanting to harm them, and not even Colossus can get through to her, till he reminds her of what happened to Phoenix. This causes Storm to snap out of her funk and fly into the sky, fixing the storm while reverting to normal and finally passing out. She is caught by Angel, and Doom lets the X-Men go in peace with Arcade, although he hopes to see Storm again. Meanwhile, throughout all 3 issues, Cyclops and Lee have washed up on an island in the Bahamas where they find a giant otherworldly city, and Lee learns about Cyclops' powers. Always a special moment for a member of the X-Men of the supporting cast. Back at X Mansion, Ileana is watching Banshee fix up the X-Men's plane, wondering if she's a mutant. Banshee, meanwhile, gets a visit from Teresa Rourke, first introduced in the pages of Spider-Woman, who turns out to be Banshee's long-lost daughter. Angel then throws a fit about Wolverine being too violent and leaves, marking the end of his tenure with Claremont's X-Men. Kind of a lame send-off, but whatever. Kitty, Storm, and Spider-Woman, who's here with Teresa, and Stevie go out to one of Deathstroke's balls, which gets attacked by this creepy masked dude named Caliban, who also speaks in the third person. Caliban kidnaps Kitty, but gets stopped by Storm and Spider-Woman. It turns out that Caliban lives underground and just wanted a friend, as he sensed that he and Kitty were alike due to her being a mutant as well. Caliban is content knowing that he's not the only mutant and leaves. Back in Tropical Paradise, Cyclops learns that the city is the new base of Magneto. Oops. Before we get to the big climax, we need to take a small detour over to Avengers Annual number 10, which seems kind of weird, but it makes sense in the long run. While the issue is a solid read, it is still very much an Avengers issue, so I'm just going to focus on the important X-Men stuff. Namely, we meet Mystique's protege, Rogue, who has the power to steal the abilities and memories of anyone she touches. She touches Carol Danvers, aka Ms. Marvel, for too long, and essentially erases Carol's mind, absorbing it into her own. While Rogue and Mystique escape, Carol decides to stay with the X-Men to help build her new life. Back in Uncanny X-Men in issue 149, Kitty must have decided that a garish costume would help her get kidnapped less, because she decides her new outfit should be all sorts of bright colors and ugly zigzags complete with roller skates. Xavier then sends the X-Men to Magneto's old base in Antarctica because he detected weird activity there, and the X-Men tell Kitty not to come along because she's just a kid and something terrible could happen if Magneto was really there, but I think they just didn't want to deal with Kitty's new outfit. It doesn't deter her though, as she stows aboard their Blackbird jet anyways. The X-Men end up fighting a weird rock version of Garak, the guy from the Savage Land that Storm couldn't save from falling into a pit, and Kitty almost dies. Big surprise. Garak then takes Storm and kneads himself into an even deeper pit to escape the X-Men, but Nightcrawler saves Storm and Garak seemingly falls to his death. Again. And now for the big 5-0. Magneto threatens to blow up the planet if he isn't given total political control. A Russian sub subsequently tries to bomb Magneto's city, but Magneto sinks it and erupts volcanoes in a Russian city, although he oh so kindly lets the people there escape. The X-Men then go after Magneto, but the magnetic field around his city crashes the Blackbird into the sea. As the X-Men swim to the city, Colossus' powers go out. When the X-Men arrive, they find Cyclops with no glasses and no eye lasers, as Magneto's base is shutting off their powers. Cyclops dictates that the X-Men can fight even without their powers, and they go to stop Magneto anyways. While Kitty tries to disrupt Magneto's computer, Storm attempts to slay the sleeping Magneto. However, she hesitates, not wanting to kill for any reason, giving Magneto enough time to use his powers to throw her out the window. Outside on a boat with Carol and Moira, Xavier attempts to telepathically attack Magneto, but the villain responds by using his powers to pull Xavier to the city where his powers are dampened. The others have destroyed part of the power dampening machine, but Magneto shows up along with the captive Xavier, Kitty, and Lee, and just fixes it. Magneto then easily captures the other X-Men, but Storm recovers and smashes Magneto's computers, giving the other X-Men their powers back. Cyclops catches Magneto off guard with a high-powered optic blast, letting the X-Men go on the offensive. Cyclops also sends Kitty to destroy the rest of Magneto's machines, but when Magneto senses something is wrong, he goes to his control room and grabs Kitty. She attempts to phase, but this turn of events startles Magneto, causing him to give Kitty a near-fatal shock. This makes Magneto panic as he nearly just murdered a child and has effectively become the very thing he swore to destroy, revealing to Storm that he is a Holocaust survivor and the Nazis gave him his perspective on humanity. He tells Storm to kill him if she wants, but Storm once again refuses, and Magneto vanishes before the others arrive. A very good Magneto story and a solid, nice, happy ending for the anniversary issue. Back over in the Uncanny X-Men Annual, all of the Fantastic Four except for Invisible Woman get captured by aliens called Badoon, who are out to destroy the Shi'ar on Archon's world. This Invisible Woman goes to get the X-Men, and they agree to help, using lightning bolts from their encounter with Archon in an earlier annual to take them to Archon's world. As it turns out, the Badoon have taken over and are using a Stargate to jump around, so Wolverine and Nightcrawler go take out the Stargate while Storm and Invisible Woman infiltrate the palace as essentially sex slaves, with Cyclops, Colossus, and Kitty running back up. They free the rest of the Fantastic Four and head into the Citadel to destroy the Badoon power source and pool all their powers together to do it. With the Stargate also destroyed, the Badoon threat is ended, and Storm and Archon share an odd kiss before the Fantastic Four and X-Men are hailed as saviors. In Uncanny X-Men number 151, Kitty gets kidnapped again. Well, more specifically, Kitty's parents transfer her from Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters to the Massachusetts Academy, run by telepath Emma Frost, who tried to recruit Kitty in her first appearance before her defeat by the X-Men. After a teary goodbye, Storm takes Kitty up to Massachusetts, and after Kitty's moved in, Storm has an encounter with Emma Frost. Storm then drives out to the countryside and starts to gleefully use her powers as if she never used them before. She then calls Sebastian Shaw, Emma's compatriot in the Hellfire Club, and tells him that the plan is underway. Back in Massachusetts, Storm wakes up in a cell in the academy and finds that she is in Emma's body. She starts to panic as Emma's telepathy kicks in, but she uses something Jean Grey told her to control the telepathy. She goes to see Kitty, but accidentally hits Kitty with a cybolt, nearly killing her. Back at the X-Mansion, the X-Men and Amanda are surprised to be attacked by Sentinels, or even more surprised when Storm, Emma in disguise, shows up and knocks them all out. Storm flees the academy with Kitty, but they are attacked by Emma, who trashes the car and leaves them for dead. Storm is nearly killed in the fire, and despite Kitty thinking that Storm is still Emma, saves her anyways. Storm manages to largely convince Kitty that she is her and not Emma, and the two get picked up by Stevie Hunter. Back at the mansion, the Hellfire Guards battle Wolverine and seemingly kill him. Storm and Kitty then break in, with Kitty using her phasing powers to free the X-Men. They then get help from Wolverine, who is saved thanks to a spell cast by Amanda. Storm and Emma then battle in the sky, switching back to their original bodies and Storm coming out on top. Out of fear of mutual discovery, the Hellfire Club and X-Men decide to end the battle there, the Hellfire Club leaving the mansion. Issue 153 is one of the most fun issues the X-Men have had in a while. Titled Kitty's Fairy Tale, it is essentially a fairy tale retelling of the Dark Phoenix saga, told to Ileana by Kitty as a bedtime story. It stars Kitty and Colossus as benevolent pirates who get hired by the wizard Xavier and the foreign prince Cyclops to help rescue their princess, Jean Grey, who has been transformed into the evil Dark Phoenix. Jean can only be saved by infusing Dark Phoenix with her true soul. Kitty calls her pet dragon, Lockheed, who flies them after Dark Phoenix. They crash on an island and meet up with a little blue gremlin called a Bamf that is basically Nightcrawler, a magic wind genie that is essentially Storm, and a big mean ogre that is Wolverine. They then pursue Dark Phoenix and manage to excise the Phoenix energy away from Jean, restoring her to her former pure self and reuniting her with Cyclops. The X-Men overhear the story, much like Kitty's embarrassment, but they all love it, especially Cyclops. Honestly, the idea of basically ripping on Claremont's own story is essentially genius, as it kind of stops other people from making comedic parodies of it, and it's really good. Issue 154 is the first of a four-part story that opens with all the X-Men except for Storm and Cyclops having relocated to Magneto's city base, while the mansion gets repaired. The ship crashes near the mansion, and inside is Corsair of the Starjammers, who finally tells Cyclops that he is his father. The mansion is then attacked by the Sindri little alien spaceships that fire lasers from their singular eye and merge into a giant spaceship. Storm and Cyclops are able to take them out with the Blackbird, and Corsair kills them by blowing up an oil plant, drawing the X-Men's ire. Corsair then explains that the Empress of the Shi'ar, Lilandra, as well as Xavier's soulmate, has been kidnapped by and the Starjammers implicated, with the Shi'ar government prepared to destroy Earth to get Lilandra back or revenge her. The X-Men and Corsair then get teleported onto the Shi'ar Dreadnought, where they are given 1 day to find Lilandra before the Shi'ar rescue her by force, although they force 2 X-Men to stay behind. Cyclops, Storm, and Xavier choose Kitty and Nightcrawler, who Xavier secretly gives the job of finding out how the Dreadnought works and infiltrating it. Xavier then locates Lilandra somewhere in Manhattan, so the remaining X-Men and Corsair team up with the only available Avenger, the acrobatic Tigra, to find her. They fight weird insectoid aliens with guns called Brood, as well as the flying Shi'ar called Deathbird, who wishes to overthrow Lilandra. The X-Men do okay, but Deathbird escapes in a riot with the kidnapped Xavier after impaling Colossus, nearly killing him. The police then show up to arrest the X-Men for property damage, but they are saved by the Starjammers, who do their best to heal Colossus. Back aboard the Dreadnought, Nightcrawler and Kitty mess around with the systems, Kitty especially having fun playing with the machine that alters one's appearance. The X-Men and Starjammers then find a giant space whale turned spaceship and fight some Brood through to the south, rescuing Xavier and Lilandra. Deathbird then ejects Storm into space, but she is saved by the Starjammers. Unfortunately, they may not have enough time to return to the Dreadnought with Lilandra before Earth is destroyed. Even worse, when Xavier tries to reach out to Kitty and Nightcrawler, he only manages to tell them that Lilandra is alive before an outside force knocks him out. Even worse, Lilandra's advisor is murdered by the War Chief, who's loyal to Deathbird. Even worse, the Brood think that the mutant X-Men will be good for breeding. But one problem at a time. Kitty uses her powers to free herself, and Nightcrawler then uses the form changer to make herself look like Dark Phoenix to scare the Shi'ar into not attacking Earth. It sort of works. Nightcrawler then kidnaps a telepath of the Shi'ar Imperial Guard, and after she reads their minds to prove that Lilandra is alive, she gathers the other loyal members of the Imperial Guard, who fight the Imperial Guard members loyal to Lilandra. Unfortunately, it is not enough as Earth is fired upon, but before it can be destroyed, the Starjammers intersect the beam, saving the Earth and allowing Lilandra to reclaim her rightful throne. The X-Men return to Earth for some peace and quiet, although not even the Shi'ar telepath is able to wake Xavier from his coma. On TV, Senator Robert Kelly plans to go after the mutants using data about them in the government database, so Kitty suggests using a computer virus to destroy the data. The Starjammers whip one up, and Carol, Storm, and Wolverine infiltrate the Pentagon. However, they get attacked by Rogue and Mystique, triggering a raging Carol that stems from the fact that Rogue stole her life. The X-Men ultimately succeed in erasing the data and stopping Rogue, although Mystique's cover as a government agent is not blown. This is followed by Storm getting bitten by literal, honest-to-goddess Dracula, who can only be hurt by holy water and crosses, because he's, Dracula. Storm briefly turns into a vampire, beats the snot out of the X-Men, and then Kitty cures her with the power of friendship or something. Dracula respects Storm's power and just leaves, and I can honestly say that I did not enjoy this issue. On the bright side, both of the previous issues have little snippets of Cyclops introducing Corsair to Havoc, and the three of them reconciling after having not seen their father in 20 years. Issue 160 is the start to one of my favorite X-Men plots, but the issue itself is also a little shaky. It starts with a strange figure watching the X-Men in the Danger Room, and then he telepathically talks to Illyana and then leads her away. He then kidnaps the X-Men in weird portals of light. Kitty ends up with Nightcrawler, but it is a weird twist in Nightcrawler. Storm and Colossus end up together, and Storm finds an armlet that lets her turn to steel like Colossus. Kitty also gets kidnapped by a powerful demon named Belasco and traps her soul in a crystal. Belasco also has Illyana, although he's being friendly to her and gives her an amulet that has to be filled with 5 bloodstones. Real Nightcrawler then fights evil Nightcrawler, and Wolverine finds Colossus' dead body before fighting a big surly demon named Sim that works for Belasco. The X-Men then all meet up and also meet an older version of Storm because, as it turns out, time flows differently in Limbo. To sum things up, the X-Men save Kitty and Illyana, but she slips back in Limbo for a second, and when she emerges from the portal, she is aged 7 years into a 13-year-old. Honestly, the issue is really confusing and could probably have used a part 2, but the long-term payoff makes it worth it. Next issue is something we haven't seen in a long time, a Xavier solo issue. Yay! The one bright spot in the issue is Cyclops and Storm having a heartfelt conversation about Cyclops feeling like everyone he loves dies, and him having a slight outburst that wanted to be leader of the X-Men again, but the two reconcile, of course. Xavier, meanwhile, is having flashbacks to the time he ended up in a mental facility in Israel to help a comatose girl named Gabriel Haller alongside a man named Magnus. Xavier uses his powers to awaken Haller, and the two soon fall in love, with Magnus acting as a third wheel. It isn't long, however, before Haller gets kidnapped by Hydra because she knows the location of a secret stash of gold. Hydra gets the gold before they can escape. Xavier and Magnus fight Hydra, both revealing their mutant powers. As it turns out, Magnus would eventually become Magneto, making this his origin story as well. They save Haller, and it's a relevant flashback wakes Xavier up. The rest of the X-Men and Carol then have a feast aboard Lilandra's ship, but they are also captured by Deathbird and the Brood, getting on the spectacular Brood Saga. Issue 162 is probably one of Claremont's best so far, and is a Wolverine solo issue, featuring him running through the jungles of an alien planet, fighting off Brood and massive insects as he waxes poetic about his fight to survive. The issue is even narrated by Wolverine, making it extra personal and impactful. Wolverine even conveniently gives us a flashback to what happened aboard the Dreadnought, with the X-Men in a mind-controlled daze and getting implanted by Brood X by a Brood Queen, which will eventually turn the X-Men into Brood themselves. Wolverine escapes into the wilderness where the issue started, and even finds the corpse of a giant space whale that the Brood are using as a base. The egg inside of Wolverine starts to hatch, but fortunately for him, Wolverine's healing factor kills the egg, securing Wolverine's safety. The issue then ends with Wolverine vowing to kill the X-Men if they turn into Brood, followed by the Brood Queen herself. The next issue opens with the Brood subjecting Carol to instant evolution, intrigued by her half-human, half-Kree physiology. Wolverine saves her from the torture, but they both know the unknown damage is already done. Cyclops has a hallucination of the X-Men turning into Brood and trying to murder him, although he soon snaps back to reality in order to comfort Storm, who is clearly out of sorts. Wolverine and Carol find them and the rest of the X-Men, and they make a plan to spring Lilandra and then escape on her yacht, docked high above the surface of the planet. Wolverine, Carol, Cyclops, and Colossus go rescue Lilandra, but Wolverine decides that he can take out the Brood Queen as well and runs off, defying Cyclops' orders. High in the sky, Storm deposits Kitty and Nightcrawler onto the yacht, Kitty phasing inside. Before she can open the airlock to let Storm in, a Brood attacks her and accidentally flings itself into space, leaving Kitty to feel bad for its death, despite what it's done. With Lilandra rescued, the X-Men are beamed aboard the yacht right before Wolverine kills the Brood Queen, leading him to lash out in anger that they almost accomplished something. The X-Men question Wolverine's mood a bit, but generally mistake his grief for rage, and Wolverine is hesitant to tell the X-Men of their fate because he knows he'll live. The yacht then comes under fire from some Brood ships, so the X-Men modify the ship's weapons to accommodate for their powers as they fight back. Kitty goes out onto the hull to repair an injury to the ship, but she gets damaged by some shrapnel in the process. As all seems lost, however, Carol turns red as her head bursts into flame like a star, and she flies into space and obliterates the Brood ships with energy blasts of unprecedented force. Calling herself Binary, Carol returns to the inside of the yacht with Kitty, who is slowly falling ill. Colossus offers Carol a place among the X-Men, but Carol admits that she doesn't know if Earth is her home anymore. Back on Earth, Xavier and Ileana have a chat, Ileana admitting that she has mysterious powers, and Xavier admitting that he feels lost and empty, with the X-Men presumably all dead. Back in space, Kitty heals miraculously quickly as Storm grows increasingly ill, and when she finally figures out that she's a Brood host, Storm takes an escape pod and jets into space. Wolverine finally explains the situation to the others, causing Carol to shift back into Binary and jet herself into space in rage, breaking a hole in the ship. Oops. This loose thread is resolved very quickly, with the X-Men sealing the hole, but it provides for a nice action sequence amidst all the angst. Another trip back to Earth, where Moira gives Xavier a letter from the Fantastic Four, asking Xavier to look after a mutant they found named Jean Claremont. Xavier initially refuses, not wanting any more mutants to die under his tutelage, but when Moira suggests that she send Jean to Emma's academy to learn how to use her powers, Xavier agrees to help. In the depths of space, Storm nearly transforms into a Brood, and after having a crisis about whether or not it is moral to kill the parasite, she decides to destroy her escape pod, letting herself freeze in space. Back aboard the space yacht, Kitty has a dream of turning into a Brood and starts to cry, although she is comforted by Colossus, and the two share a nice moment and a kiss. They then see an image of Storm and follow her. Wolverine and Nightcrawler are also hanging out when they see a similar image. The X-Men and Lilandra meet up in the control room, where Storm informs her they are about to be eaten by a space whale called Uncanny, but it's okay because she and the space whale are one. This brings us to issue 166, the last main issue of the Brood Saga. Binary beats this not out of some more Brood, then she too is called back to the yacht by Storm's astral projection. Storm then gloriously explains that the space whales are used by the Brood for their ships due to the fact that they have natural faster-than-light travel, because space, and says that the entire species is in agony because their prophet singer, who holds the soul of every space whale, is being used as the Brood castle. However, if they can free the soul, the X-Men can give it to the baby that Storm merged with, and at least save the space whales before they die of Brood eggs. When Storm's body is vibing inside an Uncanny healing pod. Cyclops agrees with Storm's idea and decides to have Storm and Binary draw the Brood's fire while the X-Men and Lilandra descend into the base to free the prophet singer. Wolverine doesn't trust the others because they could turn into Brood, so Cyclops orders him to murder them if he really feels that way, but Kitty gets him to stand down. With that out of the way, the plan commences. Storm and Binary's diversion working perfectly. The X-Men and Lilandra descend to the heart of the Citadel, fighting as many natural creatures as Brood. They then get attacked by the Brood Queen, and Wolverine snuffs out that Cyclops is being controlled by the Brood, although Cyclops takes control long enough to let Wolverine knock him out, removing him as a threat. Kitty runs off to find the soul and gets hit by a small purple fire-breathing dragon. She and the dragon find the soul and lead the X-Men, Lilandra, and the Brood Queen to it. However, it appears to be too late as the eggs inside the other X-Men start to hatch, Wolverine powerless to stop it. Fortunately, Binary shows in the nick of time uses her cosmic Brood-given star powers to send the Prophet Soul to Storm's Uncanny. This unleashes a flash of light that has the effect of killing the eggs inside the X-Men, saving them, crystallizing the Brood Queen and saving the Uncanny. The X-Men meet back up with Storm, who has regained her body, and met up with the Starjammers. Unfortunately, Wolverine knows that the Brood Queen mentioned another Queen egg that could destroy Earth, leading him to believe that Charles Xavier is infected by the Brood. Speaking of Xavier, he has some adventures of his own while the X-Men are in space, starting in Marvel graphic novel number 4, The New Mutants. Firstly, we're introduced to 4 new mutants: Ryan Sinclair, werewolf from Scotland; Robert DaCosta, Brazilian who gets super strength from the sun; Sam Guthrie with the power to launch herself like a cannonball; and Danielle Moonstar, a Native American who can pull people's worst fears from their minds. Moira saves Rain from an angry mob and takes her back to Xavier's mansion, where Xavier's checking on the aforementioned Sean, who has the power to possess people. Xavier then gets another letter from his old friend Black Eagle, who wants Xavier to check out his daughter Danielle Moonstar. Xavier, Moira, Rain, and Jean go check out Donnie, but by the time they get there, Black Eagle is dead and Donnie is getting captured by the evil mandroids. Xavier saves Donnie, although she's incredibly mistrustful of him. As it turns out, the mandroids work for the Hellfire Club, so the group splits up. Moira, Jean, and Donnie going after Roberta, and Xavier and Ron going after Sam. Roberta and his girlfriend Juliana are getting attacked by the Hellfire Club, and although Donnie and Jean manage to save Roberta, Juliana is killed in the crossfire. Xavier and Rain are then attacked by Sam, who has joined the Hellfire Club, and Xavier is captured. Rain then teams up with the other kids and they break into the base of Donald Pierce, the Hellfire Club member behind the attacks, who plans on using Xavier to take over the Hellfire Club. Sam realizes that Pierce is a jerk and lets the others free Xavier and stop Pierce. Xavier leaves with the kids, except Sam, and gets them outfits to wear as part of the New Mutants. Sam then shows up and wants to join the school, and the others let him with little argument. This is continued in the first X-Men spin-off book, New Mutants, where Danny screws things up by accidentally pulling out Jean's greatest fears, which is of the attack on her during the Vietnam War. Xavier then puts the New Mutants to training in the Danger Room, where they all get new code names. Jean is Karma, Rain is Wolfsbane, Sam is Cannonball, Roberta is Sunspot, and Donnie is Psyche. Everyone fails their session except for Donnie, who just runs away. Rain goes to comfort her, and although Donnie appreciates it, she prefers to be alone. Stevie undertakes the rest of the New Mutants into town, although they are watched by Henry Peter Gyrick. Donnie, meanwhile, runs a session in the Danger Room, where she kicks ass before the room shifts to a jungle and she is knocked out. Moira also learns that Xavier has a son with Howler, which could cause problems down the line. In issue 2, Donnie wakes up, runs around, gets attacked by a Brood in the Danger Room simulation, and passes out again. At the mall, the New Mutants make some friends before being attacked by a trio of Sentinels, courtesy of Gyrick and Sebastian Shaw, who wants to make the kids so paranoid they join the Hellfire Club. The kids get some help from Colonel Rossi, an old friend of Carol Danvers, and they manage to defeat the Sentinels before returning to the mansion. The New Mutants actually show pretty good teamwork for their second mission. The Sledgehammer Sentinel falling into the mall is pretty well done. That night, Donnie has a nightmare where she is attacked by a Brood that kills the other mutants and transforms into a demon bear, which Donnie stabs before she wakes up. Xavier checks her out to reveal everything is okay, but after everyone leaves, Donnie finds blood on her knife from when she stabbed the demon bear. Donnie and Sean gather the others in the boathouse outside the mansion to discuss the situation, but when they leave, everything has been transformed to an alien wasteland. The New Mutants use the tunnel to get back to the mansion, but are repeatedly attacked by a Brood that they can't seem to kill, and that seems to be targeting Donnie. Donnie eventually realizes that she is creating the Brood with her powers, and has Sam knock her out, ending the hallucinations. Everyone is concerned, especially Donnie, who fears that Xavier may have been pulling out her powers. This brings us back to Uncanny X-Men number 167, where the X-Men break into the mansion to find Xavier, only to run into the New Mutants. The New Mutants only recognize the X-Men as intruders and fight back, although they are pretty handily beaten by the more experienced X-Men. Xavier then shows up and transforms into a Brood, attacking the X-Men. The X-Men manage to get Xavier down, but before they kill him, Xavier regains control and begs the X-Men to finish him off before the Brood regains control. Cyclops won't see any more X-Men die, however, and takes Xavier to the Starjammer, where they clone Xavier a new body and just transplant his mind. Because saving someone's life is just that easy, Xavier's legs also work now, but his brain still registers pain when he tries to use them. Corsair and Cyclops share a heart-to-heart where Corsair reveals that he'll be returning to space eventually, as will Lilandra. But they'll be staying on Earth for a while, and he wants to take Cyclops to meet his grandparents, which has Cyclops psyched. Before anyone goes anywhere, though, Xavier's first order of business is to demote Kitty to the New Mutants. This obviously doesn't go over well, but we'll have to wait to see the conclusion, as there's one more story in between. Overall, the 5 main issues of the Brood Saga, numbers 162 to 166, are a spectacular story, and definitely the best one since Dark Phoenix, if not better. The epilogue in 167 in New Mutants number 3 isn't bad either, and trapping the X-Men in space is a good excuse for Xavier to get another set of mutants for the spin-off. Unfortunately, Dave Cockrum leaves the Brood Saga in the middle of the arc again, but his replacement, Paul Smith, is also spectacular, and the arc flows smoothly. Even though the Brood Saga is a good story to end on, the next annual connects better here than as the opening to next time, so on to annual number 7. As the opening, Rachel Van Helsing gets bitten by Dracula, because a follow to the Dracula story is just what we needed. Anyways, Kitty's parents finally get divorced, which makes her really upset, and she throws a tantrum before crying herself to sleep. As for why Kitty's with the X-Men, it is explained that Xavier was in Europe, so Kitty just gets to hang with the X-Men behind his back. Good job! Storm then gets summoned by Dracula and Rachel to get a magic book that is capable of killing Dracula. Kitty then wakes up and attacks Colossus behind closed doors before the two pursue Storm and attack her, although they are acting out of sorts. Kitty gets the book and Storm is nearly killed before she is saved by Dracula. Cyclops, Wolverine, and Nightcrawler then confront Dracula before they transform are attacked by Kitty and Colossus, and Kitty reveals that she is actually being inhabited by Lilith, Dracula's daughter who was made specifically to kill him. Lilith uses the book to attempt to kill Dracula, but before she can do it, Nightcrawler stops her, leaving Rachel to overcome her vampirism and finish Dracula off. Rachel then asks Storm to kill her, but Wolverine decides to do it instead, and Lilith releases Kitty from her hold, returning all the X-Men to normal. Despite being a vast improvement over the regular Dracula issue, I'm glad this plot is wrapped up and hopefully never coming back. Come back next time for part 3 to find out what Team Kitty ends up on and also to attend 3 weddings in the span of 10 issues, plus the New Mutants.